Well, Friday morning, and once again, it is time for relaxing painting with Dice and Dungeons. For better or worse, I don't know which one it is, we are back to the submarine. There aren't any more new dungeon tiles or minifigs to paint at the moment. Apparently, when I succeeded in getting all of those sewer tiles done and finished the minis on Monday, I pretty much used up what we had. So I will continue with the submarine. That's not a problem because there is a lot of submarine to do. Yeah, what I'm going to do is show off what has been accomplished in, I think, 5 streams now. To be fair, one stream consisted of just finding the parts, but I have the conning tower in, and it's in pretty good condition, and the torpedo room. Okay, and I was able to get the torpedo room installed on Wednesday. And what I'm beginning to work on now, and I'll show you in a little bit, what I'm not going to be working on, but I need to be at some point, is the forward bulkhead. This goes here, but unlike much of it, the submarine, there's just a lot of detail on here, including like dial faces and things. Yeah, I know. If there were only something else to paint, I wouldn't be doing the submarine, but there isn't. Our 3D printers have been quiet over the last couple of days, and so back to the submarine. I did manage to get these primed. These were the parts that I prepped. These are all upside down, right? These are bunks. These are the parts that I prepped on Wednesday, and it doesn't look like much, but it took a good deal of time to get that done. So, yeah, that. Putting aside, try not to break it. This has been a clumsy day today. Oh, let me show you where this goes. So the part I'm working on now is going to be going right here. It goes, well, this is in fact the floor of the mess hall. And it goes right there. You can see little gaps in the detail here and that little ridge there. So it goes right here like that. Okay. And underneath it, here in this lovely spot, is where the bunk room goes. That's this. It goes down here like that. There's a staircase that goes up. And although you're down in the belly of the submarine, you are right below the mess hall, right up these stairs that go from here to here. And I guess that's convenient. Up here is like a ballast tank. There's nothing there at all on this side of the bulkhead. And on this side, where you see these kind of control panel things, is a gyro room, which is kind of a weird kind of thing, but that is what it is. So sort of staying there, so you can see how that goes. Why there is all of this in the back of what is a bunk, I don't know. And then above it here is another deck that I don't have handy, which is the control room, which is filled with all sorts of panels with dials and buttons and things like that, and where the periscopes come down. So this bit here just is up to there. Okay, and you can see there's different colors of bulkheads. This light blue color is the color of the of living quarters. Okay, so there's a bunk room up here that has a light blue. The bunk room down here and the bunk room down here are painted in this kind of nice, pleasant pastel-y blue. This green is the color of the kind of mechanical areas, like the torpedo room and what will become the control room. And then it gets more interesting, less interesting actually. Back here, this whole section is where the missile tubes go. And then all of this back here, these 3 compartments include a cutaway nuclear reactor and a whole bunch of steam reduction and other machinery that turns a little propeller in the back. So that's how this is all going together. These little raised bits here are actually benches for tables where people get to sit and eat. And then these are some round tables and tiny little chairs go around them, I guess for officers. And then here, there's some bunks back here, and I guess these are like little recreation areas, like a card table or something, I'm not sure. And then the whole galley, storage, hot room temperature and cold storage, and a whole kitchen with all sorts of little appliances. All goes back here. So, yeah, just so you can get an idea, there's this whole container full of parts that have not been prepped yet that all need to fit on here somehow. And an envelope full of 11 tiny little bits of things that are supposed to be chairs. The process of prepping all of those so that they fit is going to be kind of time consuming because every piece, absolutely every piece, has something wrong with it. There's either mold marks or little circles that look like mold marks. There are flashings. Just everything is really just kind of a mess. So these cement on here, eventually I will have to scrape away a little bit of the paint, like on the top of these and the bottoms of this, so that the cement adheres. And I'll do that before I paint them, or maybe after I get them painted, because otherwise the cement dissolves the paint. Yeah, so what I need to do today is figure out how to paint these without actually holding them. So I'm going to try this with one of them. If I just put it like this, okay, it's not going to stick. And if I push it down much further, I can't get to the bottoms of these bunks. So I'm going to, yes, I will do a flip. I need to chat for a while before I do something strenuous like flipping. So what I was hoping today was that I would have some dungeon tiles to paint, and I wouldn't have to think or pay attention or do detail or anything like that, but that I could just, you know, spread paint around. But now I need to do more things. So part of what I'm going to be doing is, let's just say, the bottom of this is eventually going to be painted the dark gray hull color, because it's also kind of like just a ballast area. For some reason there's just nothing there. Underneath there is actually kind of a black radiator thing of all things. It's just flaws on everything. Sorry, there's this. I'm gonna digress here. Let me digress. This came off of the tree and there's just this protuberance on the hull. And since I see it right now, I might as well clean it off. And in fact, there's a little divot in the hull as well. which is very visible from the outside. It's not very big, but if you look, you can touch things. You can see that there's this little indentation here, because when this was broken off of the tree, instead of cutting it off down toward the tree, you know, and leaving some plastic here that could be cleaned off, when this was broken off, and this was a 60s vintage model, right? I think back here it was done right, and just a little bit of the plastic was left, and it's easy enough to just file that down and make it even with the hull. But when you break it off close to the piece rather than the tree, it leaves an indentation. It breaks the plastic away from the model itself. So this is a good digression here, just to show you the kind of stuff that you run into with this vintage model that has been started. It was started a little bit by whoever bought it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the plastic putty again, and well, at some point I'm going to get the plastic putty and I'm going to fill this divot in. Well, we had it on Wednesday as well. It's just like, this is going to become, instead of relaxing painting with Dyson Dungeons, it's going to become submarine cost overruns with Dyson Dungeons. I think it's almost getting to the point where we need to relabel what we're doing here. Okay, this might work. What I'm trying to do is just to get it, see this tab on the bottom? That's where it goes into the deck. I'm trying to get it to hold just on that so that I can paint around the bottom a little bit, the brown. What I might need to do, since I'm going to have to do some brown touch-up anyway, is I'll paint this, and then after I get the white on the sheets, there's a lot of them. There's 8 on each of these. After I get the white on the sheets, I probably have to do some brown touch-up anyway, because, you know, paint goes where you don't want it. Then I'll just touch up the bottom as well. So this is what we're going to have to live with, these bunks. I'll be painting a brown chart here. Bed frames are red brown. Okay, I want to get it the same color as the bed frames on the torpedo room. Yeah, so I'll be painting the bed frames for 2 of them that are on the sticky tack, and that then I'll do something else where that dries a little bit so I can pick them off and put the other 2 on. One thing I need to do is test floor colors. I'm going to test it on the bottom of this where it doesn't end up showing anywhere. The floor colors are on the box top. So the floor colors in the conning tower, the sail, are this cork brown, and that matched pretty well. But they're kind of a lighter color here, as you can see in the crew areas. Same color as that there. I'm going to try that color out to see if it levels nicely and covers well, because there's a lot of floor. And if it does, that's great. And if not, then they're going to be cork brown. Here. It's not a bad color. You can see that's the color there that I'm going for. And I was able to put it on this little area here, but I'm not sure whether that particular paint is going to be good for a larger area. But I'm going to paint some bed frames first, and then test the floor color here, just to let these dry a little bit. Maybe I will paint the insides of the bulkheads. It's light blue on the inside here, dark gray underneath and on this side. And this other one is where the gyro room goes. So this is light blue. And I have to check to see what color the gyro room is supposed to be. Yep, no help at all. I think I'm going to paint it green. Most of the, like the sail and torpedo room, are painted green, so the gyro room is going to be green as well. As are the mechanical rooms in the back of the submarine. Well, machinery is that turns the nuclear power into steam into propulsion. Yeah, well, let's get the red brown out. Oh, flip. We have to do a flip. There, that way you can tell which side it lands on. Ready? Heads. Heads again. On the floor. Landed heads. The reason it's landing heads is because of the shape of the paper. It's curved like this, and so it's like a heat shield on a space capsule. It just keeps it that way. So there. Okay. That's flat brown. Here it is. We'll take this out and we're going to do some painting. I'm going to use a slightly larger brush. This has a nice point on it. I need to reach down inside there and paint all of that these bits here. It will get all over to where the sheets are. I discovered that the white that I use requires at least 2, possibly 3 coats. So anyway, we're going to be putting brown paint on stuff. That was good rave look. Everything's moving around today. This is shaping up to be a 2 coffee day. That's the plastic putty that I couldn't find where I was looking for it, because I was looking for it where it wasn't. And then I just looked up and there it was. So I found it where it was. Anyway, we're going to start putting some paint on, and we got a whole lot of bunks to do. These are going to take quite a while, as you can imagine, because I paint all the bed sheets and get the lines, fairly clean on both sides of 4 of these. And then there's this one, which is sort of like the one up in the torpedo room, except that it's 3 bunks long instead of 2. And these are a little bit more of a challenge because there is no space. Okay. These bunks, there's just barely room, I'm thinking, to roll over in these bunks. You certainly can't sit up. I think submarines are claustrophobic anyway, but the bunks are even worse. Well, this is the color that I put on my color chart sheet, and so we'll start putting it on and see how it ends up looking. This is a paint that ends up, as it dries, it gets a nicer color. Bristle too stiff or what? It's pulling paint away from the painted surface. What do we talk about while I'm painting the bunk frames? Any suggestions? I think I don't know, I'm exhausting myself, probably you too, by talking about the 1950s and 60s television shows and televisions and television accessories. I haven't talked about television accessories, have I? No. The television, came on, and it used to be that prime time, which is when the news shows came on, right after the evening news, kind of. Prime time would come after dinner. So there was television like after school, and that varied depending upon our age. At first it was things like the Mickey Mouse Club. I forget exactly what it was, but there were those kinds of things. Like there was the local Bozo show where there were kids and contests and things like that, showing really old cartoons that were in the public domain kind of things. I think the Mickey Mouse Club came on as an after-school show as well, when it was on in black and white and all. Got older, then those weren't things that we watched as much. There were Oh, I think it was still like the mid 60s, where the shows like Where the Action Is, and what was it, American Bandstand? Dick Clark had this, I think Dick Clark had this show. Somebody did, and had Paul Revere and the Raiders headlining it all the time. And so we used to watch those. And actually there was a time, there were these things, they still are, soap operas, right? Which are kind of like daily half-hour or hour-long shows that were like, what's the equivalent now? Yellowstone or Succession or stuff like that. There were lots of those. There were Days of Our Lives. There were several doctor shows. Doctor shows became big for soap operas. There was Dr. Kildare and Ben Casey, MD, and which one did you like better was kind of a thing, as it usually is with that kind of stuff. Yeah, so those were the kind of after-school shows. But then there was some things were timeless, like Rocky and Michael. Just, it didn't matter what age you were, and it shouldn't now. Those are the kinds of things. And then the TV went off. Sometimes, you'd watch the local news. Why is this so yucky? Watch the local news and weather, maybe, that came on maybe before dinner. If not, the TV went off. But then the schedules changed a little bit. Anyway, the TV was a thing. You had, as I talked about before, you had getting the TV warmed up for the primetime shows. After dinner, the dishes were done and put away, and then you turn the TV on. You had to let it warm up. Sometimes some of the sets would take like 5 minutes before all the vacuum tubes were up and running. And then you had to adjust the vertical so that the picture wasn't spinning, and play with the antenna, because even though it was set up yesterday for the same channel, for some reason it wasn't working as well as it should. Some antenna adjusting going on. Yep, so you all sat down. Sometimes you had popcorn. Sometimes there'd be popcorn. Then you'd watch your primetime shows, and somewhere in there did homework. I'm not sure quite when, because TV. These little edges around the sheets that need to be painted brown. And we'll come back and do a little touch up on that later if there are spots that are missing. Well, we would have made grab that. You should be able to eat subs any day of the week. My brother actually did. He had some surgery, and during his recovery, because of the anesthesia, his sense of taste got all messed up. And the only thing he could eat was this submarine sandwich. talk about what kind or what brand, but we're not being commercial here. But he would have one every day. Anyway, yep. So I was going to talk about TV accessories. The fancy TVs, televisions were huge anyway. They just were gigantic boxes because the picture tubes were initially even longer. Their length was even longer than their diagonal measurement on the tube. So you can imagine, some of these TVs would have like a 6-inch diagonal screen, even 6 or 8 inches, some of the little ones, and the 2 feet long, because the picture tubes were just very long, because the electromagnets in the picture tubes were not helping to bend the beam, the electron beam that was painting the phosphors on the front of the picture tube. Big innovation as those became shorter, as the electromagnets on the picture tube emitter became more efficient. So because TVs, and they had a lot of vacuum tubes, and these were not and some of these tubes were pretty big too initially. You'd have maybe some tubes in there that were 6 inches long. Not itty bitty things. Definitely not integrated circuits. And then there were, a good number of circuit boards, which were plasticine material with real components, real resistors and capacitors and diodes on them. Anyway, they were large, and so the TV became a piece of furniture, and the TV cabinet sometimes became quite extravagant. Really fine woods, fine hardwoods, some things, because you wanted it to look nice in your living room. I think one of our most expensive was made out of cherry. The whole cabinet, and this was a big cabinet. Only the better part, like 3 foot by 2 foot, because it housed what was then a big TV, like it was 20-inch TV, maybe 20. I think the biggest they came at that point was like 20. Yeah, anyway, it was one of the talk about TV accessories. You need to talk about the TV cabinets themselves. Big pieces of furniture. You could even get combination units. You could get television stereo units. You can imagine what that was like. This gigantic console that was maybe 5 feet long. Had a big TV in it. It had turntable, speakers. Didn't have detached speakers. The speakers were built into the cabinet. And then sets of controls, sometimes under the lid, because you wanted the thing to look like a real piece of furniture. Yeah, those were massive. So that take up a large portion of the living room, which was just fine because your living room was built around the television set. The furniture was set up so you could sit and have a view of the TV. Then this was the start of something really important. It was like, why should we sit around a dining room table on fairly comfortable, relatively speaking, uncomfortable compared to the sofa, dining room chairs, and maybe talk, for like, how was your day today? What did you learn in school? Everybody had to recount what they learned in school every day. That was a thing. Go through all of that when you could eat and watch TV at the same time. So every household then had to get themselves a set of TV trays, little metal tables, metal legs that you could set up in front of you while you sat on the sofa, and you could eat your dinner and watch TV. And the only thing you'd have to talk about, you didn't have to recount how you did on your algebra test or anything. You could just talk about the TV show that you were watching. That was a huge social change, right? Actually, no, it wasn't that big a change. In the generations before that, people used to watch the radio. I mean, you might see that on old sitcoms or TV shows or movies or something, but that was actually a thing because the radio speakers weren't all that good. Right? I mean, they really weren't all that amazingly good, and you wanted to listen to your favorite shows. They still have those. There's a Radio Classic channel. He shows Nick Diamond. Anyway, yeah, you sat around the radio. I think they had radio trays though. You just had your living room furniture. So you weren't eating your dinner while you watched the radio like you did later with the TV. Okay, I'll let that dry. Television trays, TV trays, and that is what they were called, were these little metal tables that people might still have them. I don't know. You can still buy some new ones and vintage ones. Anyway, you pulled them up off the back and set them up, and you ate your meal right there on the little tray. And then, because you were doing that, and it was like, well, let's have a TV dinner. And those were some of the first frozen meals. They still make them. They still make them almost exactly the way they were back in whenever they showed up, like in the late 50s, early 60s, sometime in there. So they were these little aluminum trays with kind of a miniature meal. And there really weren't, it wasn't much of a meal, like a piece of chicken or a Salisbury steak. And you put them in the oven. And wait for them to heat up. And then that's what you ate on your TV tray. It sort of completed the whole thing, didn't it? You could watch TV while eating a TV dinner off of your TV tray. That's why it's important to keep rotating the work, because there's always spots that didn't get painted. Sometimes they become very obvious, and sometimes they are hidden. Anyway, yeah. So those were the most important TV accessories, were the TV trays and the TV dinners. Thinking back at it, you go, really? What was the deal? Because the TV dinners were not as good as the home-cooked meals. Even if the cooking was not very good, the TV dinners at the time were, well, they did have, they had meat of some sort and potatoes of some sort, and then a vegetable, corn or peas. There were three vegetables in there: corn, peas, and beans. Not like baked beans. They were navy beans, but like string beans. There were two kinds of beans. There were green beans and yellow beans. And it was it. I mean, you might think of things like broccoli or cauliflower, things like that, but those weren't really the veggies, except for veggie trays. Veggie tray was like a weekend thing. And you get celery sticks and carrot sticks and radishes and some sort of olives. Usually the green olives with the red pimento in them. Until we discovered the black olives, which aren't anywhere near as good as the olives that most people get now when they think of olives. I have to let those dry just a little bit before I take those off and put the next set on. So what I'm going to do next is, this is the color that I'm going to test on the bottom of this floor. So of course, I've talked about the TV antennas early on. I mean, before they really were ubiquitous, the rooftop antennas, you had an antenna that was attached to came as part of the TV, actually, the rabbit ears, and then you could get rabbit ears that you could attach to the TV separately, which had the advantage of you could actually move them around. I mean, you could like take them off of the TV and move them over to the window or something if you needed to, in order to get better reception. So the idea here is to spread this on using this larger brush, just kind of brushing it across to see how well it covers. And whether it levels nicely when it dries. So it seems to cover pretty well. I can see that it's going to need 2 coats, which is, true of a lot of these paints. Way too much paint, and no complete brush. So we're going to see what that looks like when it dries, and then probably put a second coat on. You can see how that looks, and if it levels nicely and covers well, then I will use that as the floor color. Okay, well, there's that. I'm going to see if I can take these off without marring the paint too much. Touch up the brown anyway at some later time, so it stayed dry, so that's good. Which brushes? That one just started fraying. This isn't a good detail brush, but it seems to spread the paint a little better. The bristles are a little softer. Pretty much I'm just getting paint on, trying to get the paint on all of the surfaces, knowing that at least 2 coats of white paint will be applied later to the sheets on all of these books. And then paint got on where the brown paint is supposed to be, then touch up the brown paint a little more, and do that kind of iteratively until it looks acceptable. And it isn't going to be perfect. It just, the spaces are too small and hard to reach. And my skill level, meaning especially the steadiness of my hand, is somewhat limited. Yeah, so I'm just getting these bed frames painted in anticipation of getting the sheets painted. The ones in the bunks up in the torpedo room ended up looking okay. Of course, the bunks in the torpedo room are only the size of like one side of one of these. And so I get to do it 8 times over. Yeah. It's like one side of one of them is the bunk in the torpedo room. Get to do it 8 times over. Done it once doesn't make it any easier to do it more later. Yeah. I can't remember what I did when I was a kid when I did this the first time. They must have looked really awful. That's the only thing I can think of, because the paints were not good. I shouldn't say that. The paints were good, but they weren't easy to use. They were all testers enamels. There weren't any acrylics. And so they tended to be pretty viscous. my brushes, like this brush, okay, I think this is actually a more detailed brush than the brushes I had available to me. I don't know what I did. Maybe I just painted them all white, the frames and everything. Maybe I don't remember. But no matter how mediocre the bunks end up looking this time around, they must have really been pretty not good. Pretty much not good when I did them when I was 11. I guess that is, as they say, one thing I can say is that this is looking better than it did the first time I built one of these. I'll have to admit that taking this much care is actually pretty silly in some ways, because when these bunks get put onto the floor, you can only see it from one side. So if, for example, I were to have the bunks oriented like this, you can't see the other side when you look in at it from the outside of the submarine, so it makes no sense to even bother painting both sides of this. I don't know. It's relaxing painting with Dyson Dungeons, so I guess I'll paint things, but realistically, I have to say that it's like, why did they even bother printing it on both sides? Maybe so you could have them in different orientations. I'm not really sure. But looking at how the model is put together, you really can't see the bunks on both sides. You can only see them on one side. Do I do that? Do I not bother with one side? It's actually quite tempting to just say, you can't see it. Why bother going through the bother of painting it? It's a decision I'll have to make here somewhere along the line. So let me rotate this around so that I can paint. Paint all corners. Look at the other side that we won't be able to see. You know, it would move along at least twice the pace if I only painted one side of these, at least as far as the sheets go. You know, it makes sense to do like the tops of the bunks and the edges and the sides, because those can show. You can look around or up a little bit. So the situation will be that you won't be able to see them at all, because they are going to be on the far, I mean, if you look at the bunk deck, unless you put like a dental mirror behind them or something, you won't be able to tell that the sheets on one side are not painted. You won't be able to tell that at all. And so there's this, what do you do then? You just take advantage of that and say, I'm only going to paint one side, just the side facing the outside of the submarine? Or do you say, yeah, but I know that they're not painted. The viewer might not know, they might not be able to see it, but I know. And I'll be bothered by that because it's incomplete work. We'll have to give that some thought before proceeding with the painting of the sheets. Maybe after the paint dries, we might even test fit some of this. The same thing's sort of true of the galley. There's a huge amount of detail in the galley. And some of it is not only way in the back behind all the tables and chairs, but it's actually behind some doors because there's storage units. One's a refrigerated storage unit. It's got meat in it, hanging meat. Refrigerated areas, and the other one is room temperature storage. And there's a lot of detail on it, like the cabinet handles and things like that. That you'd have to have like a distance viewing magnifying glass, and you'd have to rotate the submarine model significantly in order to really even see it. So do you bother painting the detail? I don't know. That's probably what happened when I did this originally, is a lot of it didn't ever get even painted because it was so invisible. This brush is better than the other one. Yeah, I just, just a digression, because it is. But even here, it's like this part here, the top, the bottom of the bunk above and the top of the lower bunk, when it's put into the model, it would be virtually impossible to rotate it even so that you could see it. But there, it gets painted anyway because I know it's there. But I'm going to have to decide what orientation I want these bunks to be in once they're attached to the floor. And I can cut my work in half by only painting that side when I put the sheets in. That is actually pretty tempting. Because that's, a lot of really fine pointed brush detail. You have to do 2 coats. You'll see it when I start working at it, given my skill level and all. Paints that I'm using and everything else, it's really tempting to cut my work in half. And this is why we keep rotating it. Start with this one. I'm just looking at the surfaces and rotating it to see if there are spots that just simply are not painted. Doing final detail touch-up after the sheets are painted. Looks mostly okay. All right, and while this is drying, I'll let this dry just a little bit before I pluck it off. After I take these off, I've got this one, the triple thing. Basically the same thing. And this will all be painted that color. This one goes here. The galley is all here. This is, I don't know, like a recreation area or something. I'm not really sure. There's not much there. So these are way in the back. The back of it cannot show. There's just no way you can see it. So I'll be painting like around it. Not sure what this is. If that's like a door. There's a bulkhead that goes. I'm going to take a little moment. Oh, there it is. I just want to cap this up for the moment. Before I paint it, I want to see what I'm dealing with here. That part isn't going to fit because they never do. But this bulkhead here, it has like a clock, I guess that's supposed to be. It has books, because this like a recreation reading room kind of thing, maybe the library, some lockers. And it goes like this. I think technically, at least, like that's a doorway. That this wall is going to be painted the wall color, which is a light blue color. It's kind of a nice light blue. And this little wing, now that I'm looking at it, this little wing thing here needs to be painted that light blue color and not the bed frame color. So I'm glad I checked that just to be sure. Okay, so before I paint, and let me put this all back, I am knocking into things today, just like bumping stuff. So far I haven't knocked anything over and broken it, but come close a few times. What I want to do next is I'm going to get the big brush out again. So if we look at how this floor looks, this was the floor, You can see that the paint leveled pretty nicely, but it definitely needs 2 coats. Using paint that is, I shouldn't bother with that because it's almost dried, but I just want to see what it looks like with 2 coats. If the coverage is good. You put 1 coat on and you just get these random kind of spots that aren't well covered. And when you put the second coat on, you also get random spots that aren't covered, but they're different spots than the first one, with very rare exception. So I'm thinking this color actually is going to work all right, and I'm glad it does, because I can't say it's a lovely color, but scarcely in the submarine anything is very nice, really. Okay, so I'm going to take this one off. And this is the same sort of deal, except that it's 3 high and the clearances are a little bit less. And then the brown paint also goes on these raised areas here, because these are... Hi! Oh, thanks for the raid. Thank you. As I continue to work on the submarine here, these are the benches for the tables, which are... I'll show you one. Dip into the pile of parts here. Submariners get to eat at these tables, which of course don't fit, right? Nothing fits. But yeah, they sit here on the tables. So these tables we painted brown underneath, and the tops will be, they're supposed to be white. So I guess they're like an enamel top table, because I doubt that they had tablecloths. But those are the benches that they sit on. So those will be painted the same brown color that I'm using for the frames of the beds. So thanks for joining in. This is Relaxing Painting with Dice and Dungeons, and in the absence of any dungeon tiles or minifigs that are related to Dungeons and Dragons, which is what Dice and Dungeons is actually all about, I'm working on a 1960s vintage submarine. And I have been doing that 1 day a week, having been given permission to do that, because I'm reliving my childhood by building this. I built one of these when it was original in the 1960s. I'm doing it now, and as part of the stream. Okay, this is a staircase that goes from this bunk room up to the mess hall, and I'm not sure how to paint it. The box top has sort of a color guide, but this doesn't show, so I'm just going to I'm going to paint the stair treads the same color as the floor, and I'm going to paint the railing, I guess, same color as the walls, maybe. I don't see that it should be done in the same color as the furniture. Anyway, I don't have to do that right away. What I do have to do is paint this set of bunks. start it side here. Okay, I'm going to take a moment while I'm doing this to stop talking about television and television accessories and talk a little bit about Dice and Dungeons. Dice and Dungeons started out and continues as a group of friends and relatives playing a Dungeons and Dragons campaign in a world that was created by our dungeon mistress, Alexis Bates. A really interesting and exciting and gigantic world. And we're having a lot of fun doing that. That streams with a live chat on Sundays at 3 Sundays a month. And as we started out playing, we, like any other kind of casual D&D game, it started out with nothing other than our imaginations, and then moved on to a 1x1 plastic grid, and then moved on to these little two-dimensional figures. I forget what they call. They have a name. Little two-dimensional figures that we use to represent the players and things on the 1x1 plastic grid. And then we got colored plastic grids, so that there was like a sea, and it was blue for water, and one that was green for woods, and one that looked kind of like a cave. And that got to be fun. And then Alexis said, I've always wanted a 3D printer. Let's get a 3D printer. Sure, why not? And we got a 3D printer, and it was, well, let's print dungeon tiles. What? You see them all the time on the internet, because everything's on the internet. And so started producing, just simple dungeon tiles, basically 2-inch by 2-inch squares that clipped together. And we started painting them. I started painting them because supposedly I knew what I was doing, because I built models when I was a kid. What I knew was you put your brush in the paint. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I'm not role-playing now. I could, but Dice and Dungeons does that. And, if you'd like, it would be really cool if you watched old episodes on YouTube and caught up a little bit. So anyway, we started 3D printing dungeon tiles and experimenting with them, how they were held together. And they just kept evolving and becoming more and more elaborate. And started putting ball magnets in the bottoms of them so that they would hold together on the playing table. And it just kept growing. So now we have all sorts of really cool dungeon sets, some of which you can see, like that one, the little necromancer lair there. And this stream started with the notion of, well, we're painting these things anyway. People actually stream painting shows, and me not really paying attention to social media and things of that sort. Went, really? That they do that? And I said, yeah, let's start that. So we did. And that's how Relaxing Painting with Dice and Dungeons started, is as we were preparing our dungeon tiles and minifigs for our campaign, we started streaming the production of them. And what happens occasionally is that we don't have any material related to our Dungeons and Dragons campaign, which is what happened today. And I've been given permission to use the stream. Usually it's just Wednesdays. It's called Submarine Wednesday, to work on models that I've accumulated since I retired, including this 1960s vintage cutaway submarine. Show it to you in a minute after I finish painting this bed frame rough in. So the back of this doesn't show, but you might be able to see around the edges. So I'm going to paint at least the edges of it. This tab here is part of this, and that's part of a doorway, and that's going to be painted the wall color, which is a light blue, a relaxing light relaxing light blue for the crew quarters, as opposed to a glaring bright green for the mechanical areas. Okay, painting the top of this. So it just kept growing and growing. We now have 3 3D printers. Actually 4. 3 of them are behind us. Those are the main ones. PLA printers, which we use for our dungeon tiles and for little accessories like tents and campfires and sleeping bags and crypts and river tiles. Those are kind of cool. And then we've got recently acquired a rosin printer that we've been using to produce minifigs, and I painted probably like 18 of them or something over the last month or so, that I am sure will show up as either friends or foe in our campaign. Not sure which. We'll find out. Okay, I'll set that aside, and now I'm going to, not terribly carefully, because I'm going to be painting the floor later, but just making sure it's covered, painting the benches that are built into the floor here. That are the crew's seating area for their mess hall. Digress a little bit. So on warships. So we learned this by visiting. Was it the Missouri in Pearl Harbor? And I think this is probably typical. Is that the mess hall doubles as the operating room. And I don't mean the operating room like the operation of the ship. I mean like the surgery. And that might also be true of a submarine. I don't know. This was on a battleship. There was a whole Surgery Center built in. The mess hall converted into operating tables. In some ways, that makes a lot of sense. Efficient use of space. In some ways, it's kind of disturbing. You think about where you're eating and what could be going on there. Bristles. These brushes get old, I guess. They're just not holding together very well. I know this looks really, really messy, but it is. I'm not being real careful here because I just want to make sure that the surfaces get painted and adequately covered, because I'll be painting the floor later and that will cover it all. That what is painted on the floor is even, so it doesn't leave a lot of brush marks later. Going back over the ones I painted earlier. Is not adhering really well, and I think it's the brush. Yeah, so whatever it is, whatever the cause, the brush or the paint, he's putting the second coat on is pretty easy. Yeah, anyway, that's how this all started. This whole stream was just we're painting these things for our show anyway, because we do stream the Dungeons and Dragons 3 Wednesdays a month, Twitch with live chat, and you can catch it later on YouTube or as a podcast. This is just a byproduct of that. And what was I saying? Why am I doing a submarine? Well, I accumulated all of these models when I retired, thinking that's all I would be doing is building models, because what else is there to do after you retire? It turned out that there was always lots of things to do. I have no idea how I managed to get anything done while I was still working, because my to-do list, having been retired, is larger than it's ever been. This is weird. I'm not sure why these ends here aren't covering. Just an odd texture, I guess. So I've got a whole basement full of these models, mostly airplanes, mostly World War II and earlier, because those are a lot more interesting to look at than the modern ones, which are pretty. I mean, they're very nice planes and all, but they're not as interesting looking. Pretty monochromatic kind of things. Anyway, and one of the models that I did when I was young was the submarine, the cutaway Renwell submarine, which I will show to you as soon as I am able to get these things covered in brown paint. I'm just evening it out there. Well, can I build this? Sure. If you're going to build it, can I stream it? Sure, why not? Someone might enjoy watching somebody doing an old vintage model. Started Submarine Wednesdays, but since I've run out of minifigs and dungeon tiles, I'm doing the submarine. Who knows? I might even end up doing this on Monday again. I mean, next week might be submarine week, unless we get some more things printed. You would think that this would have been really simple, but for some reason, it's not. I think thinking the main problem is that these things just are not flat. They're molded, but they're not as flat surfaces. So there's way too much paint on them, but I think it'll still be okay. let them dry, and I can deal with them when I do touch up later. I'll go back to this, do a real quick once over. This doesn't fit perfectly flat against the floor. And so like the bottom edge here just might end up showing, and I want it to not be primer. Okay, I'm just going to let that set now. Cap this up. Anyway, yeah, we're dealing with the submarine here because we don't have dungeon tiles and minifigs ready. Meaning that in order to get anything going here, going to be part of this is the paint buildup on the lid. Dealt with this before. Paint buildup on the lid and in the screws on the lid, and the paint doesn't, the cap doesn't fit. Yep. So I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing on Monday. Try to stream something. This submarine is going to go on for half of my remaining lifetime, I think, because it's moving along so slowly, especially since I'm trying to do detail painting on areas that will end up not showing anyway. There's just, this is huge buildup here. The cap doesn't go on. So are you watching relaxing removing of paint from paint bottles with Dyson Dungeons? It's having fun barking at somebody. I don't know if you can hear that or not. Sometimes it's a squirrel. Literally, it is squirrel. And the dog starts barking. Sometimes it's somebody walking along the street. You never know. Usually they ignore them, but sometimes not. So when a friend stops in, they really get going because then they come in the house and there's exuberant greeting. Okay, that's much better. Oh my. Acid running around. So, thanks for joining in. I'm sorry that we're not doing dungeon tiles for you today, but, you know, there's just something different, and that's what the submarine is about. Looking at this, I think two coats will work okay. This is just a test patch. It doesn't matter because this whole thing is going to be painted a dark gray color, which is the color of the hull and exposed areas of the hull. take a moment and show you the submarine that I'm working on in case you joined in later and you don't know what's going on. This is a original vintage 1960s Renoir cutaway Polaris launching missile submarine. This is the George Washington, which was the prototype, the very first one that was built to launch these missiles. 16 Polarises, later replaced by Poseidons. These had a single warhead. The Poseidons had multiple, I think 3 to 5, which is kind of frightening. That's your exciting nuclear reactor there. And all of the stuff that turns the steam that comes off the reactor into propulsion of the propeller. And what I have accomplished so far is this bit here and this bit here, and I'll show that to you in a second. And what I'm working on right now are these sections down here. This bunk room, this ballast area, the dining area, and like a sitting meeting area, and more bunks. And later, then I'll be moving up to here, which are officers' quarters, the control room, and the head or the bathroom. And this will be taking quite a while because there's a lot of detail painting, especially all the bunks here and all the tiny little bitty chairs. And then the galley in the back is really detailed, and you won't be able to hardly see it. The control room, as you can see, is supposed to have lots of little dials and buttons and everything else. That'll be fun. Once it gets back to here, it gets a little simpler in that it's just a bunch of torpedo tubes and some control areas. So, keeping what you just saw in mind, that's what it looks like when it's plastic. That's the torpedo room, escape hatch, and that's the conning tower or the sail. And the control room goes under here. The mess hall goes here, and those tables and things, this whole deck goes there. The bunks go here. There's a bunk deck, and back here is what's called a gyroscope room. And there's this big piece of equipment, apparently has a giant flywheel in it that helps keep everything oriented. So while I have this out, I did find the plastic putty. With these models, these big parts come on plastic trees, scrap plastic basically, and when this one was taken off, it was done in such a way that it broke off part of the hull. So this is plastic putty that then dries to be pretty hard, almost as hard as the original plastic. And I'm filling that in, and it's going to set for a while, and then I'll be sanding it down so that there's just a smooth surface. So you'll never know that it was there once it's painted. I've used it here, where when this piece was put on top of that piece, there was a little bit of a gap there. And you can see the fine white line there where the plastic putty is filling it in. And this is just sanding dust. I sanded it down last stream. So that's the kind of thing that will be done here too once that dries. Now I continue working on the mess deck here. 8 minutes before break time. This is part of the kitchen. It's the galley. A coffee urn goes here. And whatever this is, I don't know, like maybe a buffet, goes on top of it. And the kitchen bits are all supposed to be painted white. And I'm going to do that. This, you can see the difference between the primer and the not primed. And you can also see how these pieces come out where this has broke off the tree. There's excess plastic there. There's these little circles that keep showing up. You can barely see them here, but they're pretty annoying, that are part of the molding process. Just extra flashing and plastic on everything. So all of these pieces, every single piece needs to be sanded and filed so that it looks okay, but oftentimes so it even fits. Doesn't even fit otherwise. So let me show you this kitchen. This is the main part of the galley. Okay, this is the stove here. You can see there's pots and pans molded in, the cabinet covers, handles and ridges and things. So what I've decided to do is, in 1950s kitchens, white kitchens, the cabinets were oftentimes just metal. Okay, they were steel, and then they were enamel painted white, and oftentimes the edging was red. And so I'm thinking, this is a 1960s submarine. Why not? I'm going to paint it all white, and then like the cabinet drawer edges and things, I'm going to make red by using a tiny, tiny little fine point felt tip pen and just sort of touching it along the edges. See if I can pull that off or not. And there's like a sink faucet there. Yeah, I'll paint those so that, you know, you can kind of see them. These are cabinets up here, so those will be white with little red things. And that's probably like cast iron or steel, probably stainless steel pans. And so I'll do that. Anyway, that's a whole lot more prep work. That'll be another 17 hours of streaming probably to get that right. What I'm going to do here now is I'm going to get the white paint out that I'm going to be using, and it's as good a test as any. This bit here is white. Sorry about that. I was actually having a little bit of trouble holding on to the paint bottle as it was going in the mixer. Okay, so this is going to require at least 2 coats. When I've used this before, this is the same color as will be applied to the bed sheets and the bunks that I have been painting. Started here by painting this, just sort of testing out the paint. It's weird, this particular bit has no detail on it, so it's not immediately obvious what it is other than a stand. Probably is probably just a function of the design. You know, somebody was assigned designing the floor of the mess hall, and they spent most of their time figuring out where all the little openings go for all the things that are supposed to be attached to it. and it didn't get to the kitchen cabinet designers who spent all of their time designing and building in, like I showed you before, the pots and pans and faucets and canisters and stuff. And I'm going to not paint that little slot. This little slot is going to take cement later. Not painted. Yeah, it's going to have to dry. It will need a second coat. Most of these light colors do. And then we'll see how it looks. Since I've got the white paint out, what I should do, and since I should do it, I probably will, is I'm going to start painting some of the sheets on the bottom. And I've got two brushes I can use. One is a tiny little detail brush that I used with some success, and the other is this thing that has kind of a nice sharp point, and the problem with this is that the bristles are stiff, and with this white paint it doesn't go very evenly. As I'd mentioned before, you can only see one side of these bunks. Okay, when I put on the floor like this, I'll just show you how it goes. They're inserted like this. And you're looking at it from the side, and there's another deck just above it, like right about this. This, in fact, is like right here. Okay. You can't see the other side. And so the temptation is to only paint the sheets on one side. I don't know why they bothered doing it on both sides. All I can think is that, they're reversible in a way. But I'm just going to do it on one side. The picture and the instructions show them to be lined up this way. So this is the side that would show. So let me start painting the sheets and see how it goes. That is more or less, it didn't come out too badly. What the bunk is supposed to look like. And if I only do one side, I only need to do 16, 4 times 4, 16 of these. It's a little different with these lower bunks, can't really get down onto it. So the idea is to not do what I just did, but to paint enough of the sheet far enough back with an even line so that it looks okay. And then it's always important to take your brush and bump it up against the other colors so that when you say I need to do touch up later, you're not kidding. You really do need to do a lot of touch up later. This requires frequent cleaning of the tip of the brush because the paint, since it's so little, dries on the tip of the brush really quickly. And I got quiet here as I am doing this little detailing kind of stuff. And the more careful I am doing this the first time, the less touch up I need to do with the brown later. If I was careful, I wouldn't have done what I just did and slopped paint. Look at how I got that all over the edge. Well, that's why we do touch up, because even though I got this one done pretty well, this one is not. Came incautious. What I'm not getting is a very back corner at the foot of the bed. Okay. I'm going to continue doing this on this one. I'm going to start with the lower bunks because they are a pain. Look at that. I mean, just most of the problems I have with needing touch up, this one's not going well, is a result of the brush on its approach or departure from the surface to be painted, bumping into something. That's going to have to be touched up in the back there. That will be interesting, getting the brown paint on there. Got to clean this off again. So I'm going to get these 4 roughed in. That one was very rough. Wow. And then I'm going to second coat the bit there that I did for the kitchen, the galley. And then I'm going to take a break and then come back and continue painting white. And these things will generally need 2 coats and probably will dry enough so that I can do the brown touch-up yet during the stream today. Otherwise, what I'll be working on is the floors and the walls. So I've made a decision of expediency and decided that I'm not going to be painting the sheets on the side that you can't see. And I will know that forever they will be unfinished. Don't think it will haunt me, because it is impossible to see them. I mentioned earlier, maybe you could get a dental mirror, but I don't think there's even enough clearance in this model to be able to slide a dental mirror in. I'm just going to be painting these. Like I said, I'm going to second coat that shelving unit in the galley. And after break, put a second coat of white on these sheets, because as you can see, it definitely needs a second coat. And then paint the rest of them, first and second coats, and in between, as time permits, I'll be working on like painting the floor, the bunk room, and probably the floor of the kitchen, the galley, and mess hall. Yeah, we'll see how it looks after touch up, but right now it looks like we got it up a little too far in the walls back there. The second coat, we'll see what it looks like. I'm giving it a B minus, in terms of looking okay. Let's do this white paint. Go back to this unit here. Put a second coat on it. When I started painting this bit, actually before I started, I had made the decision that it's okay if the paint looks a little thick, because these are supposed to be like enameled surfaces. Paint. Yep, right at the end there. There's not enough paint to make that happen. It's much happier when it's fresh out of the bottle. She'll need for a third coat. It's good to know that before I start getting too far into this. And we'll see how this looks after it dries. Puddles down here on the floor, so I'm just going to spread it so it's thin. So I paint the floor, it doesn't show that much. Might even give it a little bit of a sanding. There. So let me recap what I've done so far. Is I have been working on the bunk deck and the mess deck. This, as you can see, is pretty messy. So I'll be doing a fair amount of brown touch-up. The sheets need a second coat. And as I mentioned before, the way this is designed is you can't see the back. Once these are put in place, you can't see them, can't see the back at all. There are 4 of these. The ones that turn out to look the best will be in the front, and the ones that don't look so good will be behind. So I'm going to hide the work. So I'm going to be playing around with white paint quite a bit. This color looks okay, so I'm going to be using it on the floors. It needs 2 coats, so I'll have to carefully do that. I will also have to be careful not to make it too thick, because as I see here, it actually bubbled up on me in one spot. If this too much, I'll be painting this dark gray, and it will be almost invisible because it's way down at the bottom. Only the edges will really be visible. So this paint covers pretty well and levels pretty well, but I need to make sure I put it on thin coats because there will be flaws in it otherwise. Okay. I'm going to take a break. Usually breaks take about 20 to 30 minutes. And then I'll be back, and I'm going to then put a second coat on these and let them dry, and then do this set of bunks here. Do the same, let them dry, and then I'll be doing a bunch of brown touch-ups so that these ragged edges and slips and things and paint in the back and things of that sort don't show. So yeah, that'll be going on a while. I will probably do paint the floor here. I'll try to get that done yet today. And then the bulkheads, these bulkheads go under here like this and hold it together. This is to be painted light blue on top and dark gray underneath. And there's one on the other side here that gets the same treatment. This side with the fire extinguishers is the side that faces the gyro room. And I'm going to be painting that. These are fire extinguishers. Those get painted red with little metallic tops. And then the rest of this will be painted the same green that you saw for the torpedo room and the sail. Keep plugging away at that, you know. These bunks get cemented on there. The stairwell that is going to be painted. I'm going to paint the stairs the same color as the floor. Why not? And I'll be painting the handrail the same color as the walls. That's probably a bad idea because of the detail involved, but you know, it's a challenge. Why not take it? And then we'll take a look at this. I might put a third coat on this cabinet unit as I'm experimenting with this white paint. Okay, do need to take a break. I will be back somewhere around 12:30-ish Eastern Daylight Time. Well, we're going to continue the saga of making a mess with white paint. As I pull out the white and paint the bed sheets on these two sets of bunks. Do the first coat. And then I'll set those aside to dry. Well, I do the second coat on the first set of bunks that I did. Then I'll come back to these and do the second coat on these and let those dry. Well, I do the first coat on this set of bunks. And as I set that aside to dry, I'll do the brown touch-up because there will be a fairly large amount of that on the first two sets of bunks. So this, so during break, someone said, well, how is it going? And but considering that I can't see very well and that my hand isn't that steady and that I don't really have any skill to begin with, even if I could see and my hand were steady, it's going pretty well. It was kind of like other than lacking the basics that I need to be doing what I'm trying to do here, it's going fine. So these are thing about doing these lower bunks is you can't really see where the brush is on the back, and so it's pretty easy to either not go far enough, as I just did, made a huge mess on the back wall by going in too far. So we'll be pulling out the brown paint and trying to make that look better. This one went, this one was, yeah, let's just say none of it's really very good now. And what happened there is what often happens is as I move the brush up to the work, I bumped. Really? Okay. That was good. Into the side of the work. Yeah, I'm just going to whine and complain because this is not something I'm very good at, and you can immediately see that as you watch me try to paint the bed sheets on these bunks. Eventually, by iterating the colors back and forth between the sheet color white and the bed frame color red brown, eventually it ends up looking adequate. Say that it ever looks terrific because the lines aren't always very even. In this case, not very even at all. Corners aren't sharp. That one, yeah. Several of these are just messy. Hang on here today if you're just joining in or being, bunks for the bunk room. Bunks in a lot of places on this submarine, but this room has only bunks in it. So it's like designed for the bunks as opposed to the bunks being added in because people need to sleep all over the submarine. Doing the bunk room in the lower deck of the the vintage George Washington Renwall cutaway Polaris launching submarine. That one was going pretty well, and then I smashed it against the side, and I got up a little bit too high on the back behind the pillow there. It seems to be kind of a recurring thing with these bunks is that if they're going kind of okay, that will end sooner than later. Yeah, I'm not chatting very much because I'm painting sheets on little bunk beds with a brush. It's minuscule with a hand that isn't steady and eyes that have had better days. But you're starting to get the idea, okay? If you look at this and if you ignore all of the rough edges, okay, you begin to see how these bunks work. So I'll be putting a second coat on those after I finish the first coat of these. I put a second coat on these. There's 4 sets of bunks. They are set up so that there's bunks on both sides. You can see that here. But the back ones absolutely positively will not show once this is assembled. So I'm not going to take the time to paint those because it will like double the amount of time it takes to get this done, and it won't add anything to the final appearance of the model. That's going to be a little bit of a cheat shortcut. To say these don't look hugely comfortable, but they're not bad compared to this. Compared to that, where there's just no room at all. You know, you can't roll over. You certainly can't sit up. It's like you slide in, and that's it. You're stuck. Okay, so these are first coated. These have dried and need a second coat. So I'm going to go back, and you can see each one of them has many, many flaws. Okay, and I am going to. There's 2 kinds of flaws. There's the flaws where the paint has gone where it shouldn't, and that will be fixed when I put the brown paint on and do the touch-up. And then there's the flaws where the white paint isn't where it needs to be, or the coverage is not good. And that's what I'm working on here. Just trying to make the sheets look evenly white. And then we'll go to the, just moving it closer here. Touching up and trying to make the edges look even. Oh my, yeah. That actually wasn't bad. And then I missed and stuck the brush way in the back there. And fortunately, with these double high bunks, I can get the brush in there and hopefully touch that up in a way that doesn't show very much. That one spot was just being recalcitrant. Clean the brush, get some new paint out. Sure. Quite how many iterations this is going to take before it finally looks acceptable. I know that there's definitely brown touch-up that needs to be done, because quite a lot of that. Hopefully there won't be too terribly much white retouching up after the brown touch-up. Find that out after we do the brown touching up. One good thing is that it looks like 2 coats is enough. The second coat is covering pretty well. And that's a good thing. So the white is covering, at least. There's just a lot of touching up. Almost all of it is just tiny little dots of paint, but the trick is making sure those tiny little dots of paint get into the spot where I want the dot and not where I don't. Epic mess making there. There. So after I finish painting the second coat on this set of bunks, first coat on the triple layer ones, these, and then the second coat on the other set of bunks. Yeah, well, part of what I'm doing here is places that were really nicely painted before. With the second coat, it's just made a mess. Hopefully that red-brown paint will behave nicely for me and cover up like that. Seriously, just wow. And slips, and just makes a mess. But that's why we do touch up. Making sure that the edges of the sheets here are painted white, even though it adds to the amount of touching up that needs to be done. They're white anyway. I can, fix things later. I can actually take these off because the brown is. I'll put this one on here, and then paint on. Whoa, yeah. There's so little space. I just have to say, I do not envy those who are stationed here. That lump is about there. It's like it's a dust or something. Sniffing. It's getting a little bit chilly down here in the studio. Not really a studio, as you can see. What it is a couple of cameras and some lights. The real studio, and it is a real studio, is for our Dungeons and Dragons campaign, which streams on Twitch with a live chat 3 Sundays a month and can be caught on YouTube and as a podcast later. Those of you who have come to appreciate Dyson Dungeons, that is the real Dyson Dungeons. This is a sort of ancillary kind of thing that was born from preparation of sets, dungeon tiles, and accessories for our D&D stream. And it was, well, if we're going to be painting them, why don't we stream it? People might enjoy watching that happen. And we created Relaxing Painting with Dyson Dungeons, which streams on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 10 more or less until 2 more or less, with a break in between. And recently, because I finished the sewer tiles more quickly than anticipated, I get to recreate a model that I built when I was in grade school, like in 7th or 8th grade or something. A 1960s Renoir cutaway Polaris launching, ballistic missile launching nuclear submarine. And what I'm building is an actual vintage kit. It's one of 3 that I purchased because it's difficult to find these vintage kits that are complete and haven't been started. All 3 of them had been started and then abandoned by their starter. And working on this, you probably could understand why someone abandoned the effort. Yeah, so I'm building this. I was given permission by our dungeon mistress, Alexis, to take some of the streaming time. Since I wanted to build it anyway, it's like, well, go ahead and put it on the stream. Who knows? People might not mind submarines. And I was originally just doing this on Wednesdays, Submarine Wednesdays, but ran out of dungeon tiles to paint because I completed my task early. And so I've had extra streams of submarine building. The edges of these sheets, yeah, are just I have now become intentionally messy with them, figuring I will fix it with the brown paint later as I paint from this direction, which is a lot easier. Hope you all don't mind watching the submarine. I know that's most of you really prefer to see things related to Dungeons and Dragons, such as the minifigs and the dungeon tiles, especially the dungeon tiles, which are really cool. But unfortunately, there aren't any available for painting at the moment. Our 3D printers are silent. They're not printing anything right now. And I finished the sewer tiles on Monday. So, yeah, more submarine. And what I'm working on now is the bunk room and the galley and the mess hall. These are bunks. This particular bunk room is located right outside the galley. I'm guessing it might be for the kitchen crew. Galley crew, the cooks, and the people who handle all of the food preparation. I'm just guessing at that. I really don't know. It's just where it's located. Using this tiny little brush, which you would think would give a lot of control over the detail, and in the hands of a skilled painter would, but for me it's mainly just getting the paint into the spots where it needs to be. Occasionally, like that, unless I mess it up, yeah, it actually works the way it's supposed to. Sides, the edges of the bed sheets are supposed to show. That's how the print is made. It's doing there. After I'm done first coating this set of bed sheets, I had second coated one set of the main bunks. Go back and second coat the other set of the main bunks. And then I will come back and second coat these. You can tell which ones I second coated because the color is a little more even. Probably come back to these just to make sure they're covered right. And after I do the second coat on all of them and the touch up on all of them, that is the brown touching up, okay, which, as you can see, will be fairly extensive touching up. Once I'm done with that, and maybe in between a little bit, just, because waiting for something to dry. I might work on like the floor and the bulkheads of the bunk room deck. Yeah, and then there's this iteration back and forth between one color and the next until it looks pretty much like it should. Wiping off the brush periodically because the paint will collect on the tip of the brush, making it hard to spread it around with any kind of accuracy at all. There isn't much accuracy here to begin with, but when you got even less accuracy, then there is not much accuracy. Yeah, the best I can say about this right now is that at least I decided not to paint the other side of the bunks where it is completely out of view. I do believe that was a wise decision. way this is printed is that the sheets actually kind of come down over the side. There's a little ridge there. So I ended up slopping more white paint on than I necessarily needed to, but I wanted to make sure that that showed the way it was designed to be. Paint up to that with the brown paint from the other direction. The demarcation line remains a little bit ambiguous, but it's pretty much right there. Just try it with the brown paint later. I'll just try to make that look even. And then there's like little spots here that there was this weird noise in the background that you couldn't hear that I could. I wasn't sure what it was. It sounded almost like one of the cats got trapped behind a door somewhere. If they paid attention at all, there's another way out of the room. One of those where there's a lot of paint where it shouldn't be, and no paint where it should be. Yeah, well, we'll test ourselves with the brown paint a little bit later. Then I start doing that touch up. This one seems to be particularly messy. Yeah. When I look at this, it's always hard to even just remind myself that by just pulling out the other color paint and painting along those lines, that it could look not gross. And I hope that's what happens here. Yeah, I got a little bit incautious there. Managed to get the paint up on that edge where it shouldn't be. Okay, well, there's some ragged edges there that will all have to be evened out. This, what this is kind of doing is it's giving the impression of what it's supposed to look like when it's done, and if it is done well. So I'm going to promise the former. This will eventually be done. I can't guarantee how well it will be done. I'll be finding that out when I get the brown paint out and start doing touch up. Looks like what's happened is this paint is dried up enough that it's not flowing. I'm just getting on the brush and kind of stopping. I'm going to do one more white go around before doing the brown touch up. What I was talking about and babbling on about earlier was television accessories. Okay. TV dinners, TV trays, TV consoles, 50s and 60s. There were a lot of things that had TV in their name. Television was a major part of people's lives. I think, now something like a TV tray would not seem to be too weird or exotic. It was just these little metal portable tables that folded up. You could put in a rack so that they weren't in the way because your living rooms weren't necessarily huge. Okay. They were not necessarily stable either, which was okay because the TV dinners that you ate on them culinary challenge. So, needing to chop into it with a knife. Most of the stuff was soft enough that you could eat it with your fork. At least the mashed potatoes and the peas, didn't require a whole lot of cutting anyway. Yeah. And then TV dinners, which continue to this day. They're not called TV dinners anymore like they were initially. And I'm thinking back on it, that was actually kind of a weird thing. Like why did they have to call them TV dinners? You could eat it. You could eat regular food on your TV trays, and people did that. Filled your plate, sat down, watched TV while you ate. Didn't have to talk about work or school because you could talk about what was going on TV because you were watching the TV. It's lovely. Got that all over everything, including my pants. Anyway, TV trays, I think you can still probably buy them. I doubt that they're probably called like streaming trays now or something. It's not. The weird thing about it that you don't have now are the giant TV consoles, because the picture tubes were not flat screens. They were huge, heavy, bulky pieces of glass that were encased in a piece of furniture. The TV console became a significant piece of furniture in most living rooms. Sometimes, they were really nicely built pieces of furniture out of beautiful hardwoods with varnish finishes. And if you're going to have this 3 by 2 foot piece of equipment in your living room, you might as well dress it up. Console TVs came in. Designed to be one of the nicer pieces of furniture in your living room. They were. So I would say that it's fair to say that the TV console was actually a TV accessory, in that it wasn't the television itself, but it was an optional piece of equipment, in this case furniture, that was built around your television. Very that oak was not a big furniture thing then. Oak was really big before that. Craftsman furniture, for example, was often oak, but walnut and cherry were kind of the furniture woods during that period of time. And so your TV console and would be designed oftentimes then to match the rest of your expensive furniture or cheap furniture, whatever you happen to have. The less expensive TVs would just come in a metal box that would be roughly the size of the television. Those were the days, too, where televisions were so big and heavy that you had to have a special kind of television called a portable TV, which probably weighed the better part of 35 pounds, maybe even more. I think that, probably around 30 pounds or something. Mm-hmm. Usually with like a 12-inch diagonal screen. And they were portable because your 24-inch TV, if you had one that big in your living room, definitely was not portable. Okay, well, you can see that this is just really messy, but the sheets are white, and after a round of touch up with the brown paint and then maybe little bits of touch up again with the white, it will come around and look okay. So I'm going to go back over these and make sure that I've got white paint where I want the white paint before I start touching up with the brown. Because once I start touching up with the brown, it's going to be difficult to get the white paint back. Or as you can see, it's just not easy to get the white paint where it should be. So you can imagine that after the brown touch-up, trying to come back and redo this will result in the same kind of disaster that continues to occur here as I'm painting. I think I've lost the will to be careful. At least that's the appearance it's giving, isn't it? See how I do when I get the brown paint out. That result of this, I hope, will be not perfect, but adequate bunks that I can then install into the bunk room. So it's just this, it's like a piece of dust or something I get on there. Oh, yeah, it's been like that today. I just keep, like, I'm not sure where the edges are or something. Keep bumping into things and knocking them over like that. Yeah, I was doing that, but now I stopped. Done talking about TV accessories. And I've got we've got 40 minutes of stream left. And I'm not talking about TV accessories, so I don't know. I mean, how are we going to fill the time? Maybe I should just go silent. People can listen to the music. What do you say? No, really? It stopped again? It's like it didn't come back after break again? Okay, well, I can't tell that because I can't hear the music down here. It's playing from the computer onto the stream and not in the studio. So I can't tell when that happens. Pass that on to those who have a clue about how it works. See if that can't get fixed. Well, if I'm silent, then you don't even have music playing. That's no good. No, I guess you just have to listen to me talk about something. I'm going to talk about, I don't know, painting the appearance of sheets on bunks in a submarine model. Every time I look at it, it looks worse. Like, why does this look like it does? I've said this before about the model. In some ways, it's amazingly detailed, like silly detail. The pots and pans hanging in the galley on the back of the sink, some of the dials and buttons. Sometimes the detail is in a place where it's intentionally designed to not even show once the thing is put together. And then other times, it's like impressionistic. This just gives the impression of being something without it actually looking like it. And these bunks are a little bit like that. I'm going to play along with that and say what I'm doing is impressionistic painting. I'm giving the impression of painting these things well without actually painting them well. This getting to the point now where I think I can just touch it up with the brown paint and they will look adequate. I'm going for, this is looking not even necessarily okay, but yeah, it could be worse. Yeah, I've seen worse. I think that's it. I'm going for yeah, I've seen worse. That's the level I'm going at here. It'll be kind of fun playing with the brown paint to see how I've seen worse ends up looking. Just doing the second coat of white on this triple set of bunks here. And then I'm going to put a little bit more white paint on the shelving unit, whatever that is, in the galley, because on that kind of surface, it's not covering all that well. And then I will this white paint dry. Start painting the brown because I don't want it to just like run all over the place, you know. I want it to all of a sudden have tan on the edges here. Just going back over these, the top bunks sometimes didn't cover quite as well as I wanted it to. Doing a little bit of quick third coat touch up, especially on the top bunks, the ones that will show the most. I have indeed made these look amazingly scabby. I have to say I'm very impressed at how bad they look at this point in their life. And I'm hoping that I can make them look better. Do here is just, again, kind of just painting the edges. These bunks are different. The, it is what it is, what it is. Okay. That's good enough to go for touching up later. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get this big brush out and squeeze out more paint. And I probably should have done this to begin with. I'm learning a lesson when I paint really small pieces for the galley, like the stove and things. When I paint those, I'm going to use this very large, very soft bristled brush so that instead of going with a little brush, I can just go like that. And the same thing here, that, okay? Which means that it's much more likely I can get an even coat of paint across the surface that I wasn't able to do with the little brush. Off. And what I want to do is I'm just going to quickly go around the bottom here to make sure that there's not real big paint buildup around the base. But using the larger brush on that worked. I should have done the same thing on these little benches instead of trying to fiddle around with a small brush. It just would work better. Live and learn, or hopefully. What did I do here? It looks like from a certain angle that it's just not painted at all, but then I look at it again and it's fine. One thing I need to do, and I'll do that while the paint's still kind of wet, is this bit back here needs to be not painted because that's where some cement is going to be going on. And with the big brush, it not only got painted, but it got painted very heavily. So I'm going to take some of it off. And then when it dries, I'll just scrape it off. Okay, that looks scabby too, but that's okay. The beds just need a lot of touching up. I'm going to do that touch-up work the next time I do a stream. I'm getting a little bit tired, and we'll see how it goes. I'm going to do a couple of other little bits of things here. These are fire extinguishers. These go on the side opposite the bunk room. They get painted red. And then the little tips of those get painted duraluminum, the dark aluminum color. And this whole bulkhead on this side, on the top at least here, this is the gyro room. I'm going to be painting that the same green as the torpedo room and the sail. And then the underside of this that you can't really see too much, but you will be able to see from the side, is painted the dark gray color. This is the outside of the bunk room, and that's going to be painted all dark gray because it's an area that, this is the outside, all dark gray because that's part of like a ballast tank. Here, light blue and dark gray. So I'm going to be doing a little bits of that, but I'm going to paint these fire extinguishers first. And this will be a little bit messy too. I want to make sure I get all around the edges. Paint up to them. The wall color. Done. And this will dry before the end of the stream. I probably will attempt to paint those little bits on the top there, the nozzle part of the fire extinguishers, the dark aluminum. This red ends up looking a little translucent, but I think that's okay because I want the fire extinguishers to be kind of dark red, which is the color they get when it dries. Yeah. Let's set that aside to dry so that I can paint the tops of the fire extinguishers later. Each of these bulkheads needs to be painted on both sides. And so I might get the dark gray out. In fact, I think I'm going to just do that. The back of this is painted dark gray. And then it gets flipped over. And I can question of which color I want to touch up. But first, I'm going to, if you recall, I tested this color paint, which is the floor color, and it seemed to work okay. So I'm going to paint this. And hopefully I can put it on here and it will hold tight, I'm going to paint this the floor color. Because it's the floor. Custom Dyson Dungeons mug. It has a 1/4 inch of cold coffee on the bottom, and I needed some water, so different mug. I'm going to need a fair amount of this paint. I'm using a big brush which holds a good deal of paint. You can always squeeze out more, but I want this to cover nicely here. I want a nice even coat across, and there'll be a second coat later. Okay. I don't want brush marks any more than necessary. What is that? I'm getting dirt. Paint and just go the other direction. We cut that out later. That little divot there is where the staircase cements in. Okay, I think that should dry to a fairly nice little surface. And then take this off for a moment. This is a staircase, and as I had mentioned earlier, I'm going to paint the stair part the same color as the floor, the stair treads, and then I'm going to make an effort to paint the handrail part the wall color, just to keep the color scheme kind of the same. I'm assuming that these stairs were painted like this, as opposed to they're just, I mean, I could have painted them just metal, you know, just painted them steel. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll end up doing that anyway. I'll see how this looks when it dries. But there is some probability that I will change my mind and decide to paint the staircase, the stairs, dark steel color. As opposed to like wall color or something. It might actually look better that way. And as I said, you know, I could be taking some time to be painting, doing the touch up on these bunks, but I get to be later in the stream like this. Just, yeah, it's not that good. I'm going to actually dab away at some of this paint that I had just put on there. I want it to be thin because I changed my mind about how I'm going to paint these, and I am going to paint them steel. So the ladders, these are called ladders, not staircases, right? They're going to be just bare metal, steel. Getting all the paint off, but I'm getting it so that it doesn't destroy the detail. Okay, it'll be like a little bit of extra primer. So it would clog up the stairs. The steel paint is very, very liquid, and it's really thin, so it's going to show the detail pretty well. But I got this. I think this is clean enough that it will be okay when I do that. And I'll even try to do that yet in the stream today. We'll see. See how is this doing? It's still a little wet. If I put the next coat on, I discovered this last time, I can end up getting bubbles. So I might end up wasting a little bit of that paint, but I think that's okay. This is going to be painted the same color. Ooh, I don't know. Dare I? Let me start. I have a lot of this paint here. It's still in pretty good shape. And I'm going to, if I can paint around the benches and this, then I can use the big brush and paint the rest of it. Let's just see how this goes. The worst that can happen is I'll have to come back with the brown paint and do that again. It's not great, but it's coming along. Paint between these. Give you a lot of room to sit here in this mess hall. So being right-handed, I can only paint in one direction at once. Painting along this side, and then I'll flip it over and paint in the other direction. Probably just as well I'm doing this now, because if I have to do brown touch-up on these benches, they're the same color as the bed frames. Same time as I do the bed frames. The tables go here in the center. Like the rest of it, this will need a second coat. As part of the touch-up process, you just saw it there, where I touched the brush to the top of the bench. Seems like an inevitability, doesn't it? Gets bumped right there because that's where the brush goes. On the front here, exactly right up to the edge. Okay. There's a tiny little spot there. Yeah. Considering this is, the first coat, see, yeah, the inevitability of that one spot every single time. It's a spam call when they keep calling back. I don't know if you can hear the phone ring, but there's a phone ringing in the background. Wrong number. Sometimes people who call the wrong number are very persistent in calling it back, saying, "Why aren't you the number I'm calling?" It's like, I'm not the number you're calling. Well, you're the number you're calling. That is to be. I mean, to be honest, this is the number you're calling, but this isn't the number you're wanting. We ever had was 3 times. So called 3 times. Each time getting more and more upset at us because we weren't the number that they wanted. I'm dialing the right number. No, you're dialing the wrong number over and over again. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's something to talk about sometimes. We could talk about wrong numbers. I like the sometimes you get sorry, you have the wrong number. Well, what's the right number? It's like, how would I know? What I know is that this isn't the right number. Can you say? So paint around the far edge here. And then I'm going to paint around the white, and I'm going to get the bigger brush out and paint the rest of the floor like I did that using a fairly thin coat evenly applied. Well, whatever it is, only called twice. That looks not too bad. I get this out again, and I'm going to make an effort to paint this well. It will need a second coat. There's no doubt. Doubt. could get a decent first coat on here, even though you won't be able to see most of this. It'll be covered with tables or benches of some sort or another. Will definitely be seeing the ends of these, so I'll have to be paying attention to that when I paint it. Looks add it, squeeze out a little bit more. And I put the second coat on the other floor. This one here. After I, make this as nice and even and brush mark free as I can. This stage. And, there's going to be touch up here necessarily. But let's get this painted again. These things all need to be cleared out later. These little things, paint in there will keep it from fitting, and the cement from cementing. And that's not a healthy thing, but it's easier to go in with a little X-Acto knife and clear that out than it is to try to not get paint in there. Okay. I think this is, it's not covering perfectly, but I think it's going to look okay. Let's do a whole bunch of brush cleaning here. And then, what have we got left? Just a couple minutes. I'm going to paint the staircase steel. That's just something quick I can do rather than trying to paint the bulkheads and the walls, the wall color. Because that's like a 3 or 4 step process. I don't know what will be happening on Monday. This is supposed to be Dungeons and Dragons sorts of things. Maybe we'll have some dungeon tiles to work with or some minifigs. I'm not sure. If not, we might just have submarine week. Yeah, we'll see how it goes next week. And at the unevenness of the paint here. Let's give this a real quick go over. Okay. I wanted to paint the staircase, and maybe I will still do that, but there it is. I had to find it. So what I'm going to do with this is there's this little bitty thing on the bottom where this attaches. That's where it attaches to the floor. Okay. I'm going to do this real quick because I want to get it done. I'm going to get the steel. Let's get a hand shake it. The wire. There's always something right at the end, right? It's got to get one more thing in. No, this is the one more thing. This is just for the sole purpose of feeling like something got accomplished. Is I'm going to use the big brush because I just want it to cover pretty well. Nice soft bristle brush. This is really good paint that covers quickly. This whole thing is getting painted this steel color, which is a dark metallic. Do that on all sides, including the bottom, because parts of the bottom actually will show. I think this will be okay. It's kind of nice and dark. It'll contrast with everything else. It still looks metallic. Could have painted a little lighter color, but yeah, I think that's going to be okay. And if it's too dark, what I can do is just paint it with a lighter color. I have a slightly lighter metallic. Okay, that's going to be it. For really even, yeah. How many things can you knock over before you stop? Many more things. I bet if I didn't even try, without even trying, I bet I could knock over like 2 more things yet in the last 2 minutes of this. Thank you for joining Relaxing Painting with Dice and Dungeons Friday Submarine Edition one more time. Generally, I paint minifigs and dungeon tiles, but I don't have any to paint at the moment, so I'm working on a 1960s vintage Renwall submarine cutaway display model, and the yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm just getting rid. There's always something. I'm getting rid of some blobs. And yeah, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 10 until 2. Please join us next week. I don't know what I'll be painting, either more submarine, probably Wednesday, because that's Submarine Wednesday. But maybe I'll have Submarine Monday and something else on Wednesday. Things will be chaotic next week. I can promise that. Watch our D&D campaign, streaming with live commentary chat on 3 Sundays a month at 2 Eastern Daylight Time. And yeah, that's enough for today. I have painted a floor, roughed in some bunks, painted some more floor. And yeah, the next time I do any painting will be continuing on the bunk room and the mess hall and galley. So, oh my God, how did I do that? The whole front of that case. Jeez. I thought I was being really careful. So I really screwed that up. I made a mess of this whole thing, and I'm going to have to repaint it. Ugh. Yeah, on that lovely note of how did I manage to do that, I have no clue. The brush didn't even come close, but nonetheless, it messed it up. After I very carefully four-coated the white on this table thing, I'll get to do it some more. Yeah, that'll be fun. I'll do that after I put the second coat of the floor on, because I'm just very likely to make the same mess again. Thanks for joining in. I hope you enjoyed watching me show you how not to do things again, and we'll see you on Monday at 10. And if you can, please join us Sunday at 2. Thanks, and goodbye.